After a decade of bleeding for every inch to build a company from the ground up, Percival was treated like a trespasser in the very lobby his money paid for. Arriving at his own headquarters with a tired 6-year-old and a pink, glittery backpack in tow, he was informed by a smug 20-something that his name wasn't on the list. Banishing the single dad to wait by the freight elevators proved to be a colossal mistake. Rather than leaving quietly, he stayed and fired the entire lobby staff on the spot. Percival's morning died at 6:15 a.m. when Mrs. Higgins, his daughter's nanny, called with a voice sounding like crushed gravel. Flu. He didn't have time for the flu. Today was the day Croft Holdings was supposed to finalize a massive capital injection into Vanguard Logistics, the company Percival had founded in a damp garage 12 years ago. He had stepped away from the daily grind 3 years back, ever since Sarah died. The boardroom had lost its appeal the day he realized all the money in the world couldn't buy his wife a new pair of lungs. He had handed the reins to a board-appointed management team, keeping his 60% stake and retreating to the suburbs to figure out how to braid hair and make pancakes that didn't resemble hockey pucks. Now, he was standing on the pavement outside Vanguard's downtown Chicago high-rise. The wind off Lake Michigan was brutal, biting through his worn canvas jacket. "Daddy, my feet are cold," Lily murmured. She was pressed against his leg, clutching a stuffed rabbit that was missing its left ear. "I know, Bug," Percival said, hoisting her into his arms. She felt lighter than she should. "We're going inside right now. It's warm in there." He hadn't been to the office in 18 months. He deliberately stayed away, letting the new CEO, a slick Wharton grad named Derek, run the show. Percival only communicated via email and proxy votes. Today, however, Beatrice Croft, a billionaire who had gutted and rebuilt 3 shipping empires before she turned 35, was flying in to meet the Vanguard executive team. Percival wanted to look her in the eye before he signed away a 30% equity slice. He pushed through the heavy revolving glass doors. The lobby was entirely different. The warm oak paneling he had chosen was gone, replaced by sterile, aggressive white marble and brushed steel. It looked less like a logistics firm and more like an operating room for androids. Percival walked up to the reception desk. A young woman with heavily contoured cheekbones and a wireless earpiece was typing furiously. "Excuse me," Percival said. She held up a single, perfectly manicured index finger. She didn't look up. Percival waited. Lily buried her face in his neck, intimidated by the echoing acoustics of the cavernous room. A minute passed. "Hi." Percival tried again, his voice flat. "I need to go up to the 42nd floor." The receptionist finally looked up. Her eyes did a quick, ruthless scan of him. Scuffed Red Wing boots, faded denim. A dark green Henley under a canvas jacket that had a faint smear of dried oatmeal on the left shoulder. And of course, the bright pink glitter backpack slung over his other shoulder. "Deliveries go through the loading dock around the back on Dearborn Street," she said, her tone dripping with rehearsed boredom. Percival blinked. "I'm not a delivery guy. I have a meeting upstairs." She sighed, a sharp intake of air through her teeth. "Name?" "Percival Hayes." Her fingers tapped the keyboard. "I don't have an Percival Hayes on the visitor log. Who are you meeting with?" "Derek Collins." She let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Mr. Collins is the CEO. He doesn't take unannounced walk-ins from—" She waved a hand at him, her eyes catching the stuffed rabbit. "Whoever you are, if you're applying for the warehouse supervisor position, Human Resources is on the 3rd floor, but you still need an appointment." "I don't need an appointment," Percival said. His patience, already thin from a sleepless night and a burned breakfast, was fraying. "Just call Derek. Tell him Percival is downstairs." I am not disturbing Mr. Collins. He is preparing for a board-level acquisition meeting with Croft Holdings. She leaned forward, lowering her voice as if dealing with a confused vagrant. I need you to step away from the desk, sir. You're blocking the path for actual clients. Percival felt the familiar, cold knot of anger tighten in his chest. He could drop the hammer right now. He could tell her who he was, watch the blood drain from her face, and demand a key card. But a twisted sense of curiosity stopped him. How deep did this rot go? He had built this company on the principle of looking out for the working guy. The drivers, the warehouse loaders, the dispatchers. When had his front door become a velvet rope guarded by snobs? Before he could answer, the elevator dinged. A man stepped out, flanked by 2 assistants. Derek Collins. He wore a bespoke navy pinstripe suit that probably cost more than Percival's first car. His hair was slicked back, and he was barking orders into a phone. Percival stepped directly into his path. Derek. Derek stopped, frowning. He pulled the phone away from his ear, looking Percival up and down. There was zero recognition in his eyes. To be fair, Derek had only met Percival twice, both times over spotty Zoom calls where Percival had his camera off halfway through. Do I know you? Derek asked, his upper lip curling slightly at the sight of the pink backpack. Percival Hayes. We have a meeting. Derek's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, then narrowed. He looked at the receptionist. Chloe, what is this? I told him to go to the loading dock, Mr. Collins. Or HR. He wouldn't listen. Derek turned back to Percival, a condescending smile stretching across his face. Ah, Percival? Right. The silent partner. The way he said it made it sound like an insult. Listen, Art, we agreed you'd dial in. I didn't expect you to physically show up, especially not... He gestured vaguely at Lily, who was now clutching Percival's leg. Like this. This is a multi-million-dollar negotiation, not a daycare. Percival's jaw tightened. My nanny got sick. I'm taking the meeting. No, you're really not, Derek said, checking his Rolex. Beatrice Croft is going to be here in 10 minutes. She is a shark. She cares about optics, efficiency, and ruthlessness. If she walks into my boardroom and sees a guy in lumberjack cosplay holding a kid, she's going to pull the deal. I've spent 6 months teeing this up. You spent 6 months teeing up a deal for my company, Percival reminded him softly. The company I tripled the valuation of, Derek snapped back, keeping his voice low but venomous. Look, sit in the overflow waiting area by the freight elevators. Keep the kid quiet. I'll come down and give you the cliff notes after Croft signs the term sheet. Derek didn't wait for a reply. He put his phone back to his ear and walked away, his assistants scurrying after him like remoras on a shark. Percival stood there in the echoing lobby. Chloe, the receptionist, gave him a smug, dismissive look. Overflow seating is down the hall to the left, she said, before returning to her typing. Percival looked down at Lily. She looked up at him, her large brown eyes wide and uncertain. Are we going home, Daddy? She whispered. Percival smiled, a genuine warm thing that erased the hard lines around his mouth. No, sweetie. We're going to sit over there for a little bit. Daddy wants to see how this plays out. He walked over to the designated area. It was a bleak corridor leading to the service elevators, furnished with 2 rigid, uncomfortable plastic chairs. He sat down, pulled Lily onto his lap, and unzipped the glittery backpack to fish out a juice box. He wasn't leaving. He was just getting started. 10 minutes later, the temperature in the lobby seemed to drop by 5 degrees. Through the glass doors walked Beatrice Croft. Percival watched her from his shadowed corner by the freight elevators. She moved like a knife cutting through silk. She wore a tailored charcoal trench coat over a bone-white pantsuit, her dark hair cut in a sharp, asymmetrical bob. She didn't walk. She marched, flanked by a single, terrified-looking aide carrying a leather briefcase. Beatrice was 34, notoriously private, and merciless in the boardroom. She had built her empire by acquiring bloated companies, stripping away the excess vanity management, and streamlining operations. Percival had researched her extensively. He actually liked her business model. It was why he had entertained this deal in the first place. As soon as Beatrice crossed the threshold, the entire lobby dynamic shifted. Chloe practically leaped out of her ergonomic chair. "Ms. Croft, welcome to Vanguard Logistics. Mr. Collins is expecting you." Derek materialized from a VIP elevator almost instantly, practically vibrating with eager subservience. "Beatrice, a pleasure, an absolute pleasure." He extended a hand. Beatrice looked at his hand for a moment before taking it. Her grip was brief. "Derek, you're running late. The term sheet specified a 9 a.m. start. It is 9:04. Derek's tanned face paled slightly. "Apologies. Traffic from O'Hare can be unpredictable. I thought—" "I don't care what you thought," Beatrice said, her voice smooth but entirely devoid of warmth. "Let's go up. I have a hard stop at 11. "Right away. My assistant will take your coat." Beatrice shrugged off her trench coat. As the assistant reached for it, Beatrice's eyes swept the lobby. She was taking it all in: the sterile marble, the quiet emptiness, the sheer waste of square footage. And then, her gaze snagged on the dark corridor. She saw Percival. Percival was leaning back in the cheap plastic chair, his long legs stretched out in front of him, quietly opening a plastic wrapper of fruit snacks for Lily, who was busy coloring in a Peppa Pig book on his knee. Beatrice paused. She tilted her head slightly. "Who is that?" she asked, her voice carrying across the quiet lobby. Derek froze. He turned, saw Percival, and a flash of pure panic crossed his eyes, quickly replaced by a smooth, dismissive smile. "Oh, him. Just a walk-in," Derek lied effortlessly. "A vendor, I believe. Probably here to pitch warehouse cleaning services. We make them wait by the service doors. I apologize for the eyesore." Percival didn't move. He met Beatrice's gaze across the room. He didn't look away. He didn't flinch. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. She had spent her entire life studying people. She knew what desperation looked like. She knew what subservience looked like. The man in the flannel shirt, calmly handing a fruit snack to a little girl, was radiating neither. He sat in that cheap plastic chair with the relaxed, heavy posture of a man who owned the floor beneath his boots. She looked at Derek, noting the slight sweat on his upper lip. "A cleaning vendor," Beatrice repeated flatly. "Yes. Ignore him. Shall we go up?" Derek gestured desperately toward the VIP elevator. Beatrice didn't move. Instead, she walked away from Derek, her heels clicking sharply against the marble, and headed straight toward Percival. Derek let out a choked sound and hurried after her. "Miss Croft, really, there's no need to—" Beatrice ignored him. She stopped a few feet from Percival. Lily stopped coloring and looked up, intimidated by the towering woman in white. Percival remained seated, popping a red fruit snack into his mouth and chewing slowly. "You don't look like a janitor," Beatrice said. Her tone wasn't insulting. It was an observation of fact. Percival swallowed. "I dabble in cleaning up messes." A tiny, almost imperceptible smirk touched the corner of Beatrice's mouth. "Is that so? And what brings you to Vanguard today? A pitch?" "Something like that," Percival said. "I'm here to evaluate the current management structure. See if they're worth keeping around." Derek finally caught up, inserting himself between Beatrice and Percival. "Okay, buddy, that's enough. I told you to sit quietly. Don't bother our guests." He turned to Beatrice, a sickly, sweet smile on his face. "I am so sorry, Ms. Croft. We have security on the way to escort him out. The vagrant problem in this city is getting out of hand." Beatrice didn't look at Derek. She kept her eyes locked on Percival. She noticed the calluses on his hands, the expensive, quiet quality of his leather boots, and the calm, terrifying stillness in his eyes. "You're going to have security throw out a man and a child?" Beatrice asked Derek, her voice deceptively soft. "We maintain a highly professional environment here." Derek puffed out his chest, completely misreading her tone. "We can't have this kind of element, loitering where we conduct high-level business." "I see," Beatrice said. She finally turned her gaze to Derek. It was like looking at an insect on a windshield. "Lead the way to the boardroom, Derek. I want to look at your financials." "Right this way," Derek practically sang, relieved. He shot Percival a venomous glare over his shoulder, mouthing the words, "You are dead," before ushering Beatrice toward the elevators. Percival watched the elevator doors slide shut. "Daddy?" Lily tugged his sleeve. "That man was mean." "Yeah, Bug, he was," Percival said softly. He checked his watch. 9:10 a.m. He zipped up the glittery backpack and stood up, lifting Lily into his arms. "Come on, let's go see a man about a job." He bypassed the freight elevators and walked straight to the VIP bank. Chloe slammed her hands on her desk. "Hey, you can't go in there! I'm calling security right now!" Percival ignored her. He hit the call button. When the silver doors parted, he stepped inside, pressed the button for the 42nd floor, and watched Chloe frantically dialing her phone as the doors closed, sealing him in the quiet hum of the ascending car. The 42nd floor was a monument to corporate excess. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dizzying, panoramic view of the Chicago skyline and the steel-gray expanse of the lake. The boardroom itself was centered around a massive slab of polished mahogany, surrounded by ergonomic leather chairs that cost more than a standard Vanguard truck driver made in a month. Beatrice sat near the head of the table, though not at the very end. She had deliberately chosen a seat on the side, forcing Derek to awkwardly position himself opposite her, rather than claiming the power seat. 3 of Derek's SVPs were arranged around him like protective gargoyles, their laptops open, projecting a slide deck filled with meaningless, synergistic buzzwords. "As you can see on slide 14, Derek was saying, using a laser pointer on the screen, our Q3 overhead reduction was aggressive. We trimmed the fat, we renegotiated the driver contracts, cut health benefits to the legal minimum, and outsourced the maintenance bays." Beatrice stared at the slide. "You cut driver benefits." "Significantly," Derek beamed. "We saved $4 million in a single quarter." "Vanguard was built on a reputation of retaining elite drivers," Beatrice noted, her pen tapping a slow, rhythmic beat on her legal pad. "The founder, Percival Hayes, made a point of paying 20% above market rate. It ensured 0 supply chain disruptions." "You reversed that?" Derek waved a hand dismissively. "Hayes is a sentimentalist. He built a good foundation, sure, but he doesn't understand modern, scalable logistics. He got lucky. He's out of the picture now anyway." Beatrice stopped tapping her pen. "Out of the picture. I was under the impression he still held a 60% controlling stake." "On paper," Derek scoffed, "but he hasn't shown his face in this building in 3 years. His wife died, and he checked out. He's a ghost. He rubber stamps whatever we tell him to. For all intents and purposes, Ms. Croft, you are dealing with the owner right now." "Me." Beatrice looked at Derek for a long, quiet moment. She had built her fortune by identifying the weakest link in a company. She had assumed Vanguard's weakness was its bloated real estate, like this ridiculous office. Now she realized the rot was sitting across the table from her. "I don't do business with proxies, Derek," Beatrice said coldly. "If I am injecting $50 million into this firm, I want the majority shareholder in the room." Derek swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I assure you, Percival is unavailable. He gave me full authority to negotiate the term sheet today." "Did he?" The heavy double doors of the boardroom clicked open. Every head turned. Percival walked in. The pink backpack was slung over one shoulder. Lily was holding his left hand, looking around the massive room in awe. Percival's face was completely devoid of emotion, a blank, terrifying slate. Derek shot up from his chair. "What the hell is this? Security!" He grabbed the phone on the table. "I told them to throw you out!" Beatrice leaned back in her chair. She didn't say a word. She just watched. Percival walked slowly toward the table. The SVPs scrambled to get out of his way. He reached the head of the mahogany table, the chair Derek had been too intimidated to sit in. Percival pulled it out and gently lifted Lily into it. "Draw me a picture, Bug," he said softly, pulling the coloring book and a fistful of crayons from the backpack and setting them on the $1,000,000 mahogany. "Okay, Daddy," she chirped, oblivious to the suffocating tension in the room. Percival turned to face the table. He rested his hands on the back of his daughter's chair. "Percival?" Derek choked out, his hand frozen over the phone console. "Hang up the phone, Derek," Percival said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the heavy, unmistakable weight of absolute authority. Derek stared at him. His eyes darted from the faded denim to the scuffed boots, then up to the cold, dead gaze of the man he had just insulted in the lobby. The blood drained from Derek's face so fast he looked like a corpse. You're, Derek stammered. "I'm the lumberjack," Percival said calmly. "The sentimentalist, the ghost." He looked at the three SVPs, who were currently trying to merge with the drywall. "I started this company in a garage with 2 leased trucks," Percival continued, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "I knew the name of every driver, every mechanic, and every dispatcher. I built a culture of loyalty. You took it, put it in a glass tower, and stripped it for parts so you could buy better suits." "Percival, please, let's talk about this in private," Derek pleaded, his voice cracking. "Ms. Croft is here. We are in the middle of a delicate negotiation." "There is no negotiation," Percival said. He finally looked at Beatrice. "Ms. Croft, I apologize for the delay." Beatrice looked at him, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her lips. "Mr. Hayes, I must admit your disguise is excellent." "Childcare fell through," Percival said simply. "It happens." Beatrice closed her legal pad. "Your CEO here was just telling me how he slashed your driver benefits to pad the quarterly margins." "I heard," Percival said. He turned back to Derek. "You didn't save $4 million, Derek. You cost us $30 million in projected lost contracts because our turnover rate is going to skyrocket in the next 6 months. You don't understand logistics. You understand spreadsheets." Derek was hyperventilating now. "Percival, I am the CEO. I was appointed by the board." The board serves at the pleasure of the majority shareholder," Percival said, "which is me. And as of right now, I am taking back active control of Vanguard." "You can't just step back in," Derek yelled, desperation making him reckless. "You don't know the first thing about running a modern enterprise." "Maybe not," Percival said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "But I know how to take out the trash." He looked at Derek, then at the 3 sweating SVPs. "Pack your desks. All of you. You're done." The room went dead silent, save for the soft scratching of Lily's green crayon on paper. "You're firing us?" one of the SVPs whispered in disbelief. "All of us? For cause," Percival said. "Gross mismanagement and acting against the foundational charter of the company. HR will have your severance paperwork, which will be the legal minimum, as you so efficiently instituted for our drivers. You have 10 minutes before I have building security escort you to the freight elevator." Derek looked like he was going to vomit. He looked at Beatrice for help, for some kind of corporate solidarity. Beatrice just tilted her head toward the door. "You heard the man, Derek. The clock is ticking." The boardroom door clicked shut behind the last SVP. The heavy mahogany panel muffled the frantic, humiliating sounds of 4 executives scrambling to empty their desks before building security dragged them into the service elevators. Inside the room, the silence was absolute. The HVAC system hummed a low, sterile C note. Percival let out a slow breath. The cold, suffocating weight that had settled in his chest down in the lobby didn't vanish, but it shifted. He rolled his shoulders, feeling the tension in his neck. He hadn't fired anyone in 3 years. He had forgotten the ugly, metallic taste it left in his mouth. "Look, Daddy," Lily's voice broke the quiet. She slid a piece of heavy stock corporate letterhead across the polished table. She had used a blue crayon to draw a lopsided truck with square wheels. A smiling stick figure sat in the driver's seat. Percival's face softened instantly. The ruthless executioner vanished, replaced by the tired, patient father. He leaned over, resting his chin on his hand. "That's a great truck, Bug. Is that Jimmy driving?" "Yeah. He's taking the boxes to the store," she said, carefully selecting a red crayon. "Make sure you draw the headlights. It gets dark on the highway." Beatrice Croft sat at the side of the table, her hands folded neatly over her legal pad. She hadn't moved. She watched the exchange with the clinical fascination of a biologist observing a new apex predator. She had dealt with aggressive men before. Wall Street was full of them, shouting, chest-thumping narcissists who thought volume equaled power. She ate them for breakfast. But Percival Hayes was different. He didn't shout. He didn't gloat. He simply recognized a diseased limb and amputated it without a second thought. And now, less than 60 seconds after decapitating his own company, he was critiquing a crayon drawing of a semi-truck. "That was incredibly reckless," Beatrice said. Her voice was flat, betraying zero emotion. Percival looked up. He didn't seem defensive. It was necessary. "You just fired your entire C-suite 10 minutes before finalizing a $50 million capital injection," Beatrice pointed out. "You have no CEO. You have no head of operations. Your organizational chart is a crater. Why shouldn't I walk out that door and pull my term sheet?" Percival picked up the blue crayon Lily had discarded. He turned it over in his fingers, feeling the wax. "Because you didn't get rich buying healthy companies," Percival said, meeting her eyes. "You buy broken things. You find companies with good bones and bad management, and you clean house. I just saved you 6 months of severance negotiations and legal headaches. The rot is gone. Vanguard's bones are still good." Beatrice's eyes narrowed slightly. He had read her playbook perfectly. "Good bones don't dispatch 500 trucks a day. Who is running the floor right now?" "The people who always run it," Percival said. "The shift managers, the dispatchers, the guys on the docks who Derek didn't even know existed. They don't need a slick Wharton grad in a bespoke suit to tell them how to load a pallet. They need someone to pay them on time and get the hell out of their way." He stood up and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. He looked down at the sprawling grid of Chicago, the tiny cars moving like blood cells through concrete veins. "When my wife got sick," Percival said, his voice dropping into a quieter, rougher register, "I had to step back. I couldn't be here 80 hours a week. I hired a search firm. They brought me Derek. They told me he was the future of logistics. Lean, agile, synergistic." He turned away from the window, his expression hardening. "I let it happen. I cashed the dividend checks and I didn't look at the casualty rate. That's on me. But I'm looking now." Beatrice studied him. "You slashed your own valuation today, Percival. You know that, right? A company with no executive leadership takes a hit in the final appraisal." "I don't care about the paper valuation," Percival said. "I care about the foundation. If you want the 30% equity, the price is the same, $50 million. But the terms just changed." Beatrice raised an eyebrow. "You're in a crater, and you want to dictate terms?" "Yes." Percival walked back to the table and scooped up Lily's backpack. "I'm hungry. My kid is hungry. We skipped breakfast. There's a diner 3 blocks from here that makes terrible coffee and excellent pancakes. We can talk about your $50 million there, or you can get back on your jet. He didn't wait for her answer. He helped Lily down from the massive executive chair, zipped her coat, and hoisted the pink backpack over his shoulder. Beatrice Croft looked at the empty boardroom. She looked at the abandoned PowerPoint presentation, still projecting meaningless buzzwords onto the screen. Then she picked up her trench coat. "Lead the way, Mr. Hayes," she said. The lobby was a very different place on the way down. When the VIP elevator doors parted, Chloe the receptionist shot up from her desk so fast her knee clipped the underside of the wood. She was pale, clutching her headset like a life preserver. Word had clearly traveled down the building's gossip network at light speed. The silent partner wasn't silent anymore. Percival didn't look at her. He didn't need to. The terror radiating from her desk was punishment enough. He walked straight out the revolving doors into the biting Chicago wind, holding Lily's hand, with a billionaire trailing 3 steps behind him. The diner was called Mike's. It was a narrow, cramped establishment shoved between a dry cleaner and a parking garage. It smelled permanently of burnt toast, strong bleach, and old bacon grease. The floor tiles were chipped, and the booths were upholstered in faded, duct-taped red vinyl. Percival guided Lily into a booth near the back. Beatrice slid into the opposite side. She looked entirely out of place, a sleek white shark sitting in a muddy puddle. She ignored the sticky menu plastered to the table and folded her hands in her lap. A waitress in her 50s with a smudged name tag sauntered over, chewing gum. "Coffee?" "Please," Percival said, "and a short stack of chocolate chip pancakes for the kid." "I'll take black coffee," Beatrice said. "Nothing else?" The waitress nodded and vanished. "All right," Beatrice said, not wasting a second. She leaned forward, resting her forearms on the table. "You said the terms changed. Lay them out, and make it quick. I don't intend to sit in this grease trap longer than necessary." Percival pulled a paper napkin from the dispenser and grabbed a pen from his jacket pocket. "First," Percival said, drawing a crude line down the center of the napkin, "the $50 million. Derek wanted to use it for a stock buyback to inflate the quarterly numbers and trigger his bonus clause." "Standard corporate narcissism," Beatrice agreed. "A waste of my capital." "Exactly. The money doesn't go to paper, it goes to rubber and steel," Percival said. "We use $30 million to overhaul the maintenance bays. Vanguard used to have the lowest breakdown rate in the Midwest. Derek outsourced the mechanics to save a buck, and our on-road failure rate spiked by 200%. Dead freight miles eat profit faster than anything else. We bring maintenance back in-house. Today." Beatrice watched him draw a circle on the napkin. "It's an expensive upfront cost. It hurts your Q4 margins." "It secures the next 10 years, Percival countered. "You want a quick flip? Go buy a tech startup. You want a logistics empire? You build infrastructure." The waitress returned, slamming 2 thick white mugs of black coffee onto the table. It splashed over the rims. Beatrice didn't flinch. "Second term," Percival said, taking a sip of the scalding, bitter coffee. "The drivers. Derek cut their health benefits and slashed their per-mile rate. I am reinstating the old contracts, 20% above market average, full medical." Beatrice finally frowned. She picked up her mug, staring at the dark liquid. "That's a massive hit to operating income, Percival. You're talking about bleeding millions a year in sheer payroll. The market doesn't reward charity." "It's not charity, it's leverage," Percival said, his voice dropping. He leaned in. "Do you know what the biggest bottleneck in global shipping is right now? It's not fuel, it's not trucks, it's CDL-certified drivers. There is a massive national shortage. The big carriers are bleeding drivers to burnout. If Vanguard pays the best, treats them the best, and actually fixes their trucks, we don't just retain our guys. We poach the elite drivers from every competitor in a 500-mile radius." He tapped the pen on the table. "When the holiday rush hits and FedEx and UPS are desperate for overflow capacity, they'll have trucks sitting empty in lots. We will have a waiting list of drivers ready to move freight. We dictate the premium rates. We hold the market hostage. Beatrice took a slow sip of her coffee. She didn't mind the bitter taste. She was processing the math. Derek had pitched her a hollow shell built on spreadsheet tricks. Percival was pitching her a war machine. It was expensive, brutal, and strategically flawless. "You're not a sentimentalist," Beatrice observed quietly. "You're a mercenary." "I take care of the people who move the freight," Percival said. "The freight takes care of the bottom line." The pancakes arrived. Lily immediately dug in, getting syrup on her chin. Percival expertly wiped it away with a napkin without breaking eye contact with Beatrice. "And the third term?" Beatrice asked. "Control," Percival said. "I'm stepping back in as CEO, effective immediately. You get your 30% equity, you get 2 board seats, but I retain 60. I hold the wheel. You don't micromanage my operations, and I don't ask you for permission to fix my company." Beatrice let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a genuine sound, startling in its rarity. "You want my money, but you don't want my oversight." "I want your capital and your geopolitical connections," Percival corrected. "You own shipping ports in Rotterdam and Singapore. Vanguard owns the Midwest roads. We connect the two, but this is my house." Beatrice looked at him. Really looked at him. The flannel shirt, the tired eyes, the fierce, uncompromising grip he had on his reality. He wasn't playing a corporate game. He was fighting for his life's work. She reached into her designer handbag, pulled out a gold Mont Blanc pen, and pulled the paper napkin across the table. She drew a line under Percival's notes and signed her initials. "Have your lawyers draft the revised term sheet by tomorrow morning," Beatrice said, sliding the napkin back to him. "50 million. Fleet overhaul. Driver pay restoration. You take the helm." Percival looked at the initials on the cheap paper. A massive weight lifted from his shoulders, though he didn't let it show on his face. "Deal," he said. Before Beatrice could reply, Percival's cell phone buzzed violently in his jacket pocket. He pulled it out. The screen flashed. Richard Galloway, board chairman. Percival stared at the name. The board had woken up. "Speak of the devil," Percival muttered. "Put him on speaker," Beatrice said, a dangerous glint in her eye. "I love a good execution." Percival placed the phone flat on the sticky vinyl table and tapped the green icon. "Richard," Percival said calmly. "Percival, what the hell is going on over there?" Richard's voice exploded through the tiny speaker, tinny and frantic. He was practically spitting the words. "I just got a hysterical call from Derek. He says you physically removed him and the executive team from the building. Are you out of your goddamn mind?" "I fired them, Richard. Terminated for cause." "You don't have the authority to unilaterally fire the CEO," another voice barked in the background. "Gregory, the head of the audit committee. I own 60% of the voting shares, Greg. I have the authority to turn the headquarters into a bowling alley if I feel like it." "Listen to me very carefully, Percival," Richard hissed, trying to regain control of his tone. He adopted the slow, patronizing cadence of a man talking someone off a ledge. "I know you've been grieving. We gave you space. But you cannot barge in and detonate a carefully structured corporate environment because you had a bad morning. You are jeopardizing the Croft Holdings acquisition." "The acquisition is fine," Percival said, cutting a piece of pancake for Lily. "It is not fine," Gregory yelled. "Beatrice Croft is a shark. If she gets a whiff of this instability, she will pull the 50 million and Vanguard will miss its Q4 debt obligations. You are going to bankrupt us, you idiot. We are convening an emergency board meeting in 1 hour. We are going to file an injunction, freeze your shares in a trust pending a psychological evaluation, and reinstate Derek." Percival stopped cutting the pancake. He looked at the phone. The sheer audacity of the threat was staggering. They thought he was weak. They thought 3 years of silence meant he was broken. He didn't get angry. He got cold. "Richard," Percival said, his voice dropping to a dead, flat calm. "Let me explain the matter to you, since Derek clearly didn't. I hold 60%. The board holds 15%. The rest is public. You cannot freeze my shares. You cannot file an injunction. And if you try to drag my mental health into a legal battle, I will personally fund a forensic audit of the board's expense accounts for the last 3 years. I know about the consulting trips to Cabo, Greg. Don't push me. There was a sudden, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. The panic had hit them. Percival, Richard stammered, the aggression completely draining from his voice. Be reasonable. The Croft deal is our only lifeline. We need Derek to massage the numbers. Croft will never sign a term sheet with a company that has no executive team. Percival leaned back against the vinyl booth. He looked across the table at Beatrice. She was finishing her coffee, looking thoroughly entertained. Percival gestured to the phone. Beatrice set her mug down. She leaned in toward the device. Richard, Beatrice said. Her voice was smooth, chilling, and instantly recognizable to anyone who read the Wall Street Journal. A choked gasp came from the speaker. Ms. Croft, I'm sitting in a diner eating cold toast with your majority shareholder, Beatrice said, casually lying about the toast. I find your lack of faith in him tedious. Mr. Hayes just pitched me a restructuring plan that makes Derek's spreadsheet look like a child's homework. Ms. Croft, I assure you, the board is entirely committed to— Shut up, Richard, Beatrice interrupted softly. The sheer dominance in those 3 words made Percival raise an eyebrow. I don't do business with cowards who threaten their founders with psychological evaluations. I am injecting $50 million into Vanguard Logistics. The term sheet is signed, but it comes with a stipulation. She paused, making them wait for it. I am taking 2 board seats, Beatrice continued, and since Mr. Hayes is retaking the CEO position, we are going to need to clear some dead weight. Richard, Gregory, consider your resignations accepted. I want your equity shares liquidated and surrendered by end of day, or my legal team will look into those Cabo trips Mr. Hayes mentioned. You can't do this, Gregory shrieked. It's already done, Percival said, taking back the conversation. Pack your things, Richard. Vanguard is going back to hauling freight, not funding your golf trips. We're done here. Percival reached forward and tapped the red button. The call disconnected. The diner returned to its normal background noise. The clatter of plates, the sizzle of the grill, the low murmur of tired people avoiding the cold. Percival exhaled. He looked at the phone for a second, then slid it back into his pocket. You didn't have to do that, Percival said to Beatrice. I had them handled. I know you did, Beatrice said, picking up her leather handbag. But I have a very low tolerance for parasites. Consider it a signing bonus. She slid out of the booth and stood up, smoothing the front of her pristine white suit. She looked down at Percival and the little girl happily chewing on a chocolate chip pancake. Your lawyers will have the paperwork by 8 a.m. tomorrow, Percival. Clean up the mess today. Tomorrow we go to war. I'll be ready, Percival said. Beatrice Croft gave a single, sharp nod, turned on her heel, and walked out of the diner, leaving a trail of expensive perfume masking the smell of old bleach. Percival sat in the booth for a long time. He watched Lily trace a syrup stain on the table with her finger. Daddy? She asked, looking up. Are you going back to work? Percival reached across the table and ruffled her hair. Yeah, Bug. Daddy's going back to work. He grabbed the check. But first we need to go buy a lot of mops. We have a big mess to clean up. The corporate tower was a monument to ego, but the South Side Depot was Vanguard's beating heart. It was a sprawling 60-bay concrete compound wrapped in chain-link fencing, perpetually humming with the low, guttural vibration of 500 diesel engines. Percival parked his beat-up Ford pickup outside Bay 12. The sky was the color of a bruised knee, spitting a freezing Chicago drizzle. He grabbed Lily's hand, pulled the hood of her pink raincoat up, and walked through the heavy steel side door. The smell hit him immediately, a mix of exhaust, stale coffee, ozone, and wet cardboard. To Derek, it was the smell of liability. To Percival, It smelled like the first 10 years of his life. The floor was quiet. Too quiet. A healthy logistics hub at 2 p.m. should be a chaotic symphony of shouting foremen, reversing forklifts, and pneumatic brakes. Instead, trucks were parked in dead lines. Drivers stood in tight, murmuring clusters near the break room. The tension in the air was thick enough to chew. Percival walked toward the dispatch cage. A man he didn't recognize, wearing a high-vis vest over a clean, unwrinkled polo shirt, stepped into his path. "Hey, no kids on the floor!" the man barked, holding up a clipboard. "Insurance violation. Who are you with? If you're looking for lost freight, you need to call the 800 number." Percival looked at the man's vest. The logo read Apex Solutions, the outsourced management group Derek had brought in to cut overhead. "Where's Russo?" Percival asked. "Who?" "Mike Russo, the floor manager. He's run this dock for 9 years. The Apex guy snorted. "The old guy? We reassigned him to night shift gate duty. He couldn't meet the new turnaround metrics. Now, I need you to turn around and walk out before I call—" "Call who?" Percival interrupted softly. "Security? They work for me. You work for me. Well, you did until about 3 seconds ago." The man frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Percival bypassed him entirely, stepping up to the chain-link mesh of the dispatch cage. He grabbed the public address microphone resting on the desk. He flicked the switch. Feedback squealed through the cavernous warehouse, freezing every man and woman on the floor. "Attention on the floor!" Percival's voice echoed off the corrugated steel ceiling. "This is Percival Hayes." The name dropped like a cinder block. Heads snapped up. The clusters of drivers broke apart, people stepping out of the shadows of their rigs to get a look at the cage. Most of the new hires didn't know the face, but the veterans did. "Mike Russo," Percival said into the mic. "If you're in the building, get to the cage. Tommy Miller, Sarah Jenkins, get up here too." He let go of the mic. The silence in the warehouse was absolute. A minute later, a heavy-set man with graying hair and a permanent limp pushed through the crowd. Russo. He looked older, worn down, his eyes carrying the heavy exhaustion of a man who spent his days apologizing for rules he didn't write. Russo stopped 10 feet from Percival. He looked at the faded denim, the boots, and the little girl holding Percival's hand. "Artie?" Russo's voice was gravelly, hesitant. "They said you cashed out. Said you didn't care anymore." "They lied, Mike," Percival said. He turned to the Apex manager, who was now nervously tapping his phone. "Get your people together and get off my floor. Your contract with Vanguard is terminated." "You can't do that," the manager stammered. "We have a locked-in vendor agreement." "Take it to court. I have $50 million in a legal fund that says you breached contract by causing a 200% spike in delayed loads," Percival said flatly. "Leave the clipboards. Walk out. Now." The manager looked at Percival's eyes, swallowed whatever threat he had queued up, and practically sprinted toward the administrative offices. Percival turned back to the crowd. 150 drivers and dock workers had gathered in a semicircle. They looked at him with a mix of hostility, hope, and deep suspicion. Percival didn't use the mic this time. He stepped out of the cage, standing level with them on the oil-stained concrete. "I messed up," Percival said. His voice carried, cutting through the hum of the idling engines. "When my wife passed, I walked away. I put this company in the hands of men who think you are line items on a spreadsheet. I let them cut your pay. I let them gut your medical. I let them fire the mechanics who kept you safe on the road." He looked around, making eye contact. He saw anger. He let them have it. He deserved it. "I can't undo the last 3 years," Percival continued. "But I can fix tomorrow. Derek Collins is gone. The board is gutted. I am back in the driver's seat. As of right now, the old pay scale is reinstated, plus a 5% bump for inflation. The health plans revert to the gold tier, and Russo is back to running this floor." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. It wasn't cheering. They were too tired and too cynical for that. It was the sound of disbelief. Tommy Miller, a driver who had been with Percival since the garage days, crossed his massive arms. "Words are cheap, Art. Derek promised us bonuses last Christmas and gave us $10 gift cards to Applebee's. How do we know this isn't just a stall tactic to keep us from striking?" Percival nodded. He expected this. "Because I'm not asking you to trust my words, Tommy. I'm asking you to check your phones." Percival pulled his own phone from his pocket. He had spent the car ride from the diner authorizing an emergency payroll override. "I just pushed a retroactive back pay adjustment for the last 3 months. It hits your direct deposits in 10 minutes. Silence. Then, a few beeps echoed in the warehouse. Then a dozen. Then a wave of incoming text alerts. Tommy pulled out his phone. He stared at the screen for a long time. The harsh fluorescent light reflected off the glass into his eyes. Slowly, the tight, angry lines around his mouth relaxed. He looked up at Percival. "You're really back, boss?" Tommy asked, his voice thick. "I'm back," Percival said. "Now start the engines. We have freight to move." At 8 p.m., Percival's suburban house was quiet. It was a modest 4-bedroom colonial, aggressively normal, standing in stark contrast to the billions of dollars he technically commanded. The living room was a minefield of Lego bricks. The kitchen smelled of garlic and butter. Lily was asleep upstairs. Percival was sitting at the kitchen island, nursing a glass of cheap bourbon, staring at a mountain of digital files on his laptop. The maintenance logs Derek had hidden were a disaster. The fleet was literally falling apart. His phone buzzed. It was a Google News alert. Wall Street Journal exclusive. Vanguard logistics in chaos as grief-stricken founder stages hostile takeover. Croft deal in jeopardy? Percival clicked the link. The article was a hit piece, precision engineered for maximum damage. Anonymous sources, clearly Derek and Richard, claimed Percival had suffered a psychological break, violently storming the offices, firing critical executives, and threatening physical harm. The article insinuated that Vanguard was fundamentally insolvent and that Percival's return was the final death rattle of a failing company. Percival rubbed his temples. The bourbon suddenly tasted like ash. They were trying to spook Beatrice. If public perception painted Percival as a madman, Croft Holdings' shareholders would demand Beatrice pull the plug on the $50 million injection. Headlights swept across his front window. Percival stood up, walking into the living room and peering through the blinds. A sleek, black Cadillac Escalade was idling in his driveway. The driver's door opened, and a massive man in a dark suit stepped out, opening the rear passenger door. Beatrice Croft stepped onto Percival's cracked concrete walkway. She was wearing a black cashmere turtleneck and an impeccably tailored wool coat. She looked like a grim reaper with a 401k. Percival opened the front door before she could knock. "Nice neighborhood," Beatrice said dryly, stepping past him into the foyer. She sidestepped a plastic dinosaur and looked around the cluttered, warm living room. "I expected a fortress, or at least a cleaning service." "I like doing the dishes," Percival said, closing the door. "I assume you saw the journal." "I did," Beatrice said. She walked into the kitchen, taking a seat on one of the wooden bar stools. She looked entirely incongruous, sitting next to a pile of unpaid water bills and a half-eaten box of Cheerios. "Derek and Richard are predictable. They ran straight to the press to burn the house down on their way out." "Is your board spooked?" Percival asked. He poured a second glass of bourbon and slid it across the granite counter toward her. Beatrice picked up the glass, inspecting the amber liquid before taking a sip. She didn't wince. "My board does what I tell them to do, but the market is a different beast. If the narrative by tomorrow morning's opening bell is that you're a lunatic tanking his own company, Vanguard's valuation will plummet. The banks will freeze your credit lines. You won't be able to buy fuel, let alone overhaul your maintenance bays. Percival leaned against the counter. So we change the narrative. How? Beatrice asked, her eyes sharp. You don't have a PR department anymore. You fired them. I don't need PR. I need a match, Percival said. He turned his laptop around so Beatrice could see the screen. He had pulled up 3 separate documents. The first was the maintenance log Derek had heavily redacted for the board. The second was the unredacted version Percival had pulled directly from the servers using his original founder's access. The third was a series of wire transfers. Derek wasn't just cutting costs to look good, Percival said, his voice cold. He was cutting costs to cover his tracks. Look at the outsourced maintenance firm, Apex Solutions. Look who owns the parent LLC. Beatrice leaned in, scanning the documents with the terrifying speed of a woman who read balance sheets for fun. Her finger traced the corporate structure on the screen. A shell company registered in Delaware, Beatrice murmured. Owned by... She stopped. She looked up at Percival, a genuine smile of predatory delight breaking across her face. Richard Galloway. The chairman of the board, Percival nodded. Derek was outsourcing Vanguard's maintenance to a company secretly owned by our own chairman at a 30% premium. They were bleeding the company dry and pocketing the difference. That's why the trucks were breaking down. They weren't actually fixing them. They were just billing us for it. Beatrice finished her bourbon in one swift swallow. Embezzlement, corporate fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. This isn't just a scandal, Percival. This is federal prison. The journal article paints me as a grief-crazed founder destroying a functional company, Percival said, his jaw tightening. We send this to the SEC, the DOJ, and Bloomberg News tonight. By 6 a.m., the narrative isn't that I had a breakdown. The narrative is that I returned to root out a massive criminal conspiracy and saved Vanguard from a parasitic board. Beatrice looked at him. The silence in the kitchen stretched for a long moment, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. You had this, she said quietly. You had this all day. You could have dropped this in the boardroom this morning and buried them instantly. Why didn't you? Percival looked away, staring at a framed photo on the wall. It was Sarah, smiling, her hair wind-blown, holding a 1-year-old Lily on a beach in Michigan. Because if I dropped it in the boardroom, it would have stayed in the boardroom, Percival said softly. They would have begged. They would have offered to resign quietly in exchange for non-disclosure agreements. I would have been tempted to take it just to make them go away. He turned back to Beatrice. The softness was gone. But they went to the press. They tried to ruin the company my wife helped me build. So now I'm not just firing them, I'm destroying them. I needed them to throw the first punch in public so I could end it in public. Beatrice Croft, a woman who had gutted billionaires and laughed at Wall Street titans, felt a rare shiver of absolute respect run down her spine. You're a terrifying man, Mr. Hayes, Beatrice said. She pulled her phone from her coat pocket. I have Bloomberg's editor-in-chief on speed dial. Send me the files. Let's go hunting. The sun rose over Chicago like a bruised peach, casting long, sharp shadows across the steel grid of the city. By 7 a.m., Derek Collins was finished. Bloomberg dropped the exclusive story just as the pre-market trading opened. The headline was a tactical nuke. Vanguard Purge. Founder uncovers massive embezzlement ring by outgoing CEO and chairman. Croft Holdings backs restructuring. The accompanying article didn't just expose the fraud, it included the paper trail. It painted Percival not as an erratic, grieving widower, but as a silent guardian who had awoken to protect his people. It framed Beatrice Croft's $50 million injection as a massive vote of confidence in Percival's leadership. By 9:00 a.m., Vanguard's public shares dipped slightly in initial shock, then surged 14% on the news of the Croft backing and the elimination of the corrupt board. By 10:00 a.m., FBI agents were seen carrying cardboard boxes out of Derek Collins's Gold Coast penthouse. At 11 a.m., Percival Hayes walked back into the glass tower. The lobby was different today. There was no velvet rope feeling. Chloe, the receptionist, was gone, replaced by a retired Vanguard dispatcher named Martha, who actually knew the names of the drivers who walked through the doors. Percival took the VIP elevator to the 42nd floor. He didn't go to the boardroom. He walked straight into the CEO's corner office. It was sterile. Cold leather, glass tables, abstract art that meant nothing. Percival stood in the center of the room. He hated it. "Give me 2 guys from maintenance," Percival said over his shoulder to his newly appointed executive assistant. "I want the glass desk gone. Bring up the old wooden one from storage, the one with the burn mark from the coffee pot. And get rid of this couch. I want a play area in that corner. Rug, toy chest, the works. Lily gets out of school at 3. "Right away, Mr. Hayes," the assistant said, scribbling furiously. Percival walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window. He looked out over the city. He could see the highways weaving through the concrete, the tiny specks of white semi-trucks moving like blood cells. His trucks, his people. His cell phone vibrated. "Hayes," he answered. "The wire transfer just cleared." Beatrice Croft's voice came through crisp and clear. $50 million is sitting in Vanguard's operating account. The board seats are finalized. We are officially in business, partner. "I appreciate the speed, Beatrice," Percival said. "Don't thank me. I just bought 30% of a company whose stock is currently surging. I made $3 million before I finished my morning espresso," she replied. There was a pause. "For what it's worth, Percival, your wife would be proud of the mess you made." Percival closed his eyes. A tight, painful lump formed in his throat. But for the first time in 3 years, it didn't feel like it was suffocating him. It felt like breathing. "Yeah," Percival whispered. "I think she would." "I'll be in Chicago next month for the quarterly review," Beatrice said, returning to her usual brisk tone. "I expect the maintenance bays to be fully operational." "They will be. Oh, and Beatrice?" "Yes?" "Next time you come to town, we aren't eating at the diner. I'll make you a decent steak." Beatrice let out a short, genuine laugh. "I'll hold you to that, Mr. Hayes. Goodbye." The line clicked dead. Percival lowered the phone. He stood by the window for a long time, watching the trucks move across the arteries of the city. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the small, framed photo of Sarah. He walked over to the bare window ledge and set it down, facing the skyline. He had spent 3 years hiding from the world, thinking he was protecting his daughter by shrinking their lives down to a suburban house and a quiet routine. He had let men who cared about nothing but money erode the legacy he and Sarah had built. Never again. The door to the office opened behind him. It was Mike Russo, looking incredibly out of place on the executive floor, holding a grease-stained clipboard. "Hey, boss," Russo said, clearing his throat. "We got a bottleneck at the Cincinnati hub. Weather system moving in. We need to reroute 20 trucks or we blow the delivery windows." Percival turned away from the window. He looked at Russo, then down at the clipboard. The grief was still there, tucked in his pocket. But the ghost was gone. The founder was back. "Bring it here, Mike," Percival said, rolling up the sleeves of his flannel shirt. "Let's move some freight." Sometimes, the biggest mistake a company can make is forgetting who poured the concrete for their glass towers. Percival didn't just take back his company. He reminded corporate parasites that spreadsheets don't move freight. People do. If you loved watching a real father and founder clean house, protect his own, and put the suits exactly where they belong, hit that like button. Share this video with someone who knows what actual leadership looks like. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about quiet titans, brutal justice, and the moments when the rubber finally meets the road.